The story begins at the top of a mountain during a heavy rain, where a brutal battle has already left several people lying across the ground. Only two fighters are still standing, and even they are barely holding themselves together after everything they've been through. One of the defeated men lies stretched out on the ground, completely drained, while another struggles to catch his breath nearby. Their weapons have also suffered badly from the fight, with one sword left almost completely damaged after taking countless hits. Despite being pushed to his limit, Bai Qiang is still standing with his sword in hand. He is known throughout the martial world as the strongest wandering swordsman, a title he earned after spending 18 years traveling from place to place in search of his family's lost martial arts. However, Bai Qiang doesn't actually feel proud of that reputation. To him, being called the strongest wandering swordsman is hardly something worth celebrating because it only reminds him how long he has stayed away from home. His real purpose was never to become famous. He wanted to recover his family's martial arts, return to the Bai family, and eventually turn his declining family into a respected and powerful martial clan. After 18 years of effort, though, that goal still feels far away. With that thought in mind, Bai Qiang tells his opponent to step aside because he has no intention of wasting any more time here. The man standing in front of him is Nam Gung Yang, the young master of the powerful Nam Gung clan. Yang refuses to back down because he knows Bai Qiang's ability is far too dangerous to ignore. In his view, someone with this level of martial skill cannot simply be allowed to leave and continue growing stronger. He believes Bai Qiang has to be defeated here before he can become an even bigger threat to the established martial clans. Yang also finds it difficult to understand how Bai Qiang managed to reach such a high level while relying on what he considers low-grade martial techniques. Instead of being impressed by Bai Qiang's achievement, he seems to look down on the methods that brought him there. Bai Qiang doesn't waste time responding to that comment and simply tightens his grip on his damaged sword. Yang then raises his own blade and makes it clear that he isn't going to stand aside and watch a wandering swordsman rise above the rest of the martial world. Bai Qiang finds his attitude irritating and calls him garbage before moving in to attack. The two swords crash together, and the force of their exchange spreads through the area around them. While continuing the fight, Bai Qiang questions whether this is really the kind of behavior expected from the famous Namgung clan, especially when Yang seems to be relying on threats instead of simply proving himself with his sword. Yang responds by saying that one of them will die here today, and he has no doubt that Bai Qiang will be the one who loses. Bai Qiang finds the comment amusing rather than intimidating and mocks Yang's poor sense of humor before launching another powerful strike, asking whether he really believes he can defeat him. Yang manages to block the attack, but he cannot completely absorb its force and is pushed backward by the impact. He has spent 18 years wandering because of his family's situation, and the thought of finally going back is what keeps him moving, even when his body is already exhausted. He wants to rebuild the family his father left behind and restore the pride that has been lost over the years, so he cannot afford to lose here. Bai Qiang keeps provoking Yang, telling him to stop holding back and fight with everything he has. Yang accepts the challenge, and the battle continues for 4 full hours. During that time, the two men exchange more than 1,000 attacks, with neither one willing to give the other a clear advantage. There are countless moments where a single mistake could decide the entire fight, and both of them continue throwing attacks capable of ending the battle if they connect properly. Even after fighting for hours, neither swordsman is willing to retreat. Eventually, Bai Qiang reaches the point where he has almost nothing left, but instead of slowing down, he puts everything into the strike. The attack finally ends the battle. Namgung Yang's body loses its strength, and he begins falling to the ground. Even after being defeated, he has to admit that Bai Qiang's skill is worthy of the reputation he has earned as the strongest wandering swordsman. With only a little consciousness left, Yang gives Bai Qiang a short apology for what he has done. Bai Qiang refuses to accept it because, in his eyes, an apology doesn't erase the damage caused by someone's actions. He tells Yang that it is easy for someone to do terrible things when they believe they can simply say sorry afterward and consider the matter finished. But while saying this, Bai Qiang's own condition continues to deteriorate. The 4-hour battle has taken an enormous toll on him, and his body can no longer keep up with his will. He coughs, drops down onto his knees, and struggles to breathe because he has used almost every bit of strength he had left. At this point, Bai Qiang understands that he is also nearing the end of his life. His thoughts return to the one one place he has wanted to see for years, the Bai family estate. More than anything, he wanted to return home and restore his father's pride by rebuilding their family into the great clan his father had always hoped it would become. Now, while lying on the cold ground, he realizes that he may never be able to fulfill that promise. He looks at his trembling hands and feels the weight of knowing that he is going to break his word to his family. He apologizes to his father and younger brother in his mind because he couldn't accomplish what they had hoped for. He wanted to turn the Bai family into a respected clan, but after 18 years of wandering and fighting, he is going to die without reaching that goal. As his consciousness gradually fades, Bai Qiang can only hold on to the thought of returning home before everything goes dark. When Bai Qiang opens his eyes again, he finds himself in the body of a young child. He has no idea what is happening and looks around the large courtyard while trying to understand where he is. Then, he hears an adult's voice nearby. Turning toward the entrance, he recognizes the front gate of the Bai family estate. This is the same place he had been trying to return to before his death, yet now he is standing there as a child. Bai Qiang remembers that he had just been dying on the mountain, so he initially thinks this might simply be a final dream created by his fading consciousness. The man beside him then calls him Yang Huai and explains that the name represents brilliant sunlight, saying that he hopes the boy's life will remain bright. He introduces himself as Bai Mu Yang, his father, and warmly asks the child to call him Dad from now on. Yang Huai is too confused to respond properly, and when Bai Mu Yang encourages him to say something, the boy can only stare at him. He recognizes this younger version of his father because Bai Mu Yang looked exactly like this when Bai Qiang was first adopted into the family. That makes Yang Huai think even more strongly that his mind is showing him an old memory before he finally dies. But Bai Mu Yang tells him to open his eyes properly and look at what is happening around him. So Yang Huai does exactly that. Once he looks around the courtyard, Yang Huai sees the entire Bai family gathered there to welcome him. A young woman asks Bai Mu Yang whether this child is really their newly adopted son, and Yang Huai immediately recognizes her as his mother from many years ago. She looks much younger than the mother he remembers from his previous life, but there is no mistaking her face. He then notices his younger brother standing nearby, who doesn't seem entirely comfortable with the new situation and watches Yang Huai with suspicion. At the same time, little Yan Yang is delighted because she has just gained a new older brother. Yang Huai keeps looking at each of them, comparing what he remembers with what he is seeing now until the answer finally becomes clear. This isn't a memory and it isn't a dream. Somehow, he has returned to the past, back to the moment when he first became part of the Bai family. Yang Huai now understands that the life he lost has been given back to him, along with the opportunity to change everything that went wrong. Looking at his young mother and the rest of his family, he makes a promise to himself. If this really is his second chance, then he will not allow the same things to happen again. This time, he will stay with his family, protect them, take care of them, and make sure that the Bai family reaches the future he failed to give them in his previous life. As he looks at his mother, he notices how young she is compared to the woman he remembers. His father and the family's head butler, Mr. Han, also look healthy and full of energy. Seeing all of them together confirms what Yang Huai had already begun to suspect. He has returned to the time when he was only 8 years old, long before the events that ruined his family's future. He still has all the knowledge and memories from his previous life, which means he knows many of the problems that are going to come their way. This time, he plans to use everything he remembers to take the Bai family to the top of the martial world. While the family is gathered in the courtyard, their attention is suddenly drawn toward the front gate after loud noises begin coming from outside. Before anyone can figure out what is happening, the large wooden gate is smashed apart, sending pieces of wood across the entrance. Bai Mu Yang is alarmed by the sudden attack and demands to know who would dare break into the Bai residence like this. A group of men then enters through the destroyed entrance, walking through the dust and debris as if they have every right to be there. One of them even steps directly onto the broken remains of the gate before demanding to know whether this is the Bai residence. He says that they have come to settle a blood debt and expects the Bai family to pay for what their patriarch has done. Yang Huai recognizes the man as soon as he sees him, because this is not the first time he has witnessed this scene. The man leading the group claims that he is the heir of a commander from the Hongyo faction and accuses Bi Mu Yang of destroying one of their affiliated gangs. According to him, the men Bai Mu Yang defeated were under their protection, so the Bai family's actions have to be answered for. Bai Mu Yang doesn't understand why he is being confronted over this. He explains that the men he defeated were criminals who had been kidnapping innocent people, so he believes stopping them was the right thing to do. The gang leader doesn't care about that explanation. His response is that those criminals carried the Hongyo faction's name, which means attacking them was the same as disrespecting the faction itself. He then demands an enormous amount of money from the Bai family as compensation. Bai Mu Yang is left struggling to understand how he is supposed to accept such a demand when he was the one who stopped criminals from harming innocent people. To Yang Huai, however, the situation is painfully familiar. He remembers exactly what happened the first time this incident occurred. In his previous life, this confrontation turned into a fight that left his father seriously injured. The gang members also took whatever valuables the Bai family had, and the incident damaged the family's reputation so badly that their financial situation collapsed. From there, the Bai family was pushed into a difficult life with almost nothing left to support themselves. Yang Huai remembers all of it, which is why he knows that allowing the same thing to happen again is not an option. Instead of remaining silent like he did in his previous life, Yang Huai steps forward. His sudden movement catches the attention of the men, while Bai Mu Yang immediately tells him to get back because he is worried that his adopted son could be hurt. Yang Huai understands his father's concern, but he isn't the same child who went through this incident without knowing what to do. He calmly tells Bai Mu Yang not to worry and asks whether his father has any plan for dealing with the situation. At the same time, Yang Huai lets them know that he has his own way of handling the problem and asks his family to trust him. He then walks toward the men while reminding himself that he has already experienced this day once before. He knows what these people are capable of. He knows what happened afterward, and he has no intention of letting history follow the same path this time. Rather than confronting them with anger, he decides to use his head and find a way out of the situation without allowing the Bai family to suffer the same losses. When Yang Huai reaches the group, he suddenly changes his attitude and greets the large gang leader with a cheerful smile, calling him Big Brother. The strange behavior catches everyone off guard. The gang members don't know how to react, and even Yang Huai's family is left wondering what the boy is trying to do. The gang leader takes offense at being addressed so casually by an 8-year-old and points out that he is already 30 years old, so there is no reason for a child to speak to him as though they are the same age. Yang Huai completely ignores his irritation and instead starts complimenting his appearance, telling him that he doesn't look anywhere close to 30 and could easily pass for someone under 20. The men standing behind their leader quietly point out that their boss has always enjoyed being praised for looking young, even though his rough appearance makes the compliment somewhat hard to believe. The gang leader tries not to show how pleased he is, but Yang Huai can clearly see that the flattery has worked. He even agrees that his youthful appearance is well known in the area. Once he has enjoyed the compliment for a moment, he returns to his original attitude and praises Yang Huai for having such a good eye, but he also reminds the boy that flattering words won't make the Bai family's debt disappear. Yang Huai continues playing the part of an innocent child and begins explaining his own situation. He tells the men that until recently, he had been living on the streets without anyone to look after him. He then claims that he was almost taken away by a group of criminals, but Bai Mu Yang rescued him and brought him into the Bai family. By presenting the story this way, Yang Huai makes his father appear as someone who had gone out of his way to save a helpless child. Bai Mu Yang listens to his adopted son's story and is deeply moved by the way Yang Huai describes him. The gang members also begin talking among themselves, agreeing that the people who tried to kidnap the boy must have been terrible criminals. The leader becomes more serious and admits that such people would deserve punishment, but he quickly returns to the issue at hand. He argues that even if the affiliated gang members were criminals, they were still operating under the Hongyo faction's banner. According to him, only the faction has the right to punish its own members, so Bai Muyang had no right to interfere. Mr. Han, the family's old butler, can no longer stay quiet after hearing this argument. He points out the obvious hypocrisy in their reasoning, accusing the men of protecting criminals simply because they belong to their faction. The gang leader takes the comment as an insult and turns his attention toward the old butler, demanding that he show proper respect. He even threatens to kill him for speaking out of turn. The situation begins getting tense again, and it looks like the confrontation is about to turn into another fight. Yang Huai sees where things are heading, so he steps between them with a smile and tries to calm everyone down before the men can make their threats a reality. Still wearing that innocent smile, Yang Huai suggests that Bai Muyang and the gang leader should stop arguing and simply settle the matter between themselves. He points out that he isn't involved in their original dispute and offers to provide some useful information in exchange for having the entire matter forgotten. The gang leader finds the suggestion amusing, but he is also impressed that a child this young has the courage to speak to him so confidently. He crouches down so they are at the same level and agrees to let the matter go if the information Yang Huai has is actually worth hearing. Yang Huai asks him to listen carefully and leans closer, preparing to tell him the secret. Before allowing him to continue, however, the gang leader warns him that there will be serious consequences if the boy is only wasting his time with a made-up story. Yang Huai gives a slightly nervous laugh and reminds him that a person who calls himself a boss should be someone who keeps his promises. The gang leader takes the point seriously enough and orders his men to move away so that nobody else can overhear what is about to be said. Once the others have stepped back, Yang Huai moves close to the man's ear and lowers his voice. He then reveals that there is a spy hiding among the gang's own members. The information catches the leader off guard, and he immediately asks Yang Huai how he could possibly know something like that. Yang Huai doesn't hesitate and claims that he picked it up from rumors he heard while living on the streets. He speaks with enough confidence to make the story believable, then gives the leader another detail. The spy has a blue snake tattoo somewhere on his body. Yang Huai explains that the tattoo is connected to the Snake Organization, a rival group known for sending people undercover to infiltrate other gangs and cause problems from within. He then gives the name of the person responsible, telling the gang leader that his own subordinate, Book Shin, is the spy. The leader's expression changes as soon as he hears the name, because Book Shin isn't some random member of the gang. He is one of his most trusted men and has been serving as his right-hand man. Furious at the accusation, the leader grabs Yang Huai by his clothes and demands to know how he could possibly claim that Book Shin is a traitor when every member of the gang had already gone through an inspection. Yang Huai doesn't argue with him. Instead, he calmly asks one simple question. During that inspection, did they actually make everyone remove their clothes down to their underwear? The question catches the leader completely off guard. He realizes that his so-called inspection had never included anything that could have revealed a tattoo hidden beneath someone's clothes. The possibility that his most trusted subordinate had taken advantage of that weakness starts to sink in, and his anger grows as he considers how easily he may have been deceived. He turns toward his men and calls Book Shin's name. Book Shin answers from within the group, trying to behave as though nothing is wrong, but the leader gives him an unexpected order. He tells him to remove his clothes and stand there in nothing but his underwear. Book Shin is clearly uncomfortable with the demand and tries to avoid doing it, asking why he has to strip in front of everyone. The leader refuses to listen and tells him that an innocent man has nothing to hide. He even assures Book Shin that he will be the only one watching, then orders him again to take everything off. Yang Huai watches the exchange with a small smile because he remembers exactly how much trouble this spy caused the Bai family in his previous life. He knows that exposing Book Shin here can prevent many of the problems that were waiting for them later. The gang leader has already lost his patience, so he points directly at Book-shin and accuses him of being the spy. He orders him to remove his clothes and prove that Yang Huai's accusation is false. Book-shin tries to stall again, but the leader makes it clear that there is no way out of the situation. Realizing that the trap has closed around him, Book-shin's expression changes. He suddenly shoves aside several of the men standing around him and tries to escape before anyone can check his body. The sudden attempt to run confirms the truth for the gang leader. He immediately realizes that Yang Huai was telling the truth and shouts for Book-shin to stop. Book-shin doesn't listen. He runs through the yard as quickly as he can, trying to put as much distance between himself and the gang as possible while wondering how everything went wrong so quickly. He knows that staying there will only get him caught, so he keeps running, occasionally looking behind him to see how close the others are. He doesn't get very far. A large shadow soon falls over him, and when Book-shin looks back, he realizes that his own boss has already caught up. The leader looks at the traitor with anger because this is someone he trusted, and now that trust has been completely broken. Book-shin tries to get away, but the leader gives him no chance to escape and attacks him. A quick exchange follows, with the gang leader beating down the traitor for betraying him and secretly working with a rival organization. After the struggle, the dust in the Bai family's yard settles, revealing Book-shin lying on the ground, badly beaten and tied up with thick ropes so he can no longer run. The gang leader is forced to acknowledge that Yang Huai's information saved him from continuing to trust a spy who had been hiding among his own people. Because the Bai family helped expose the traitor, he decides to forget the original dispute and tells them that the previous debt between them is no longer a problem. Yang Huai continues acting like an innocent child and listens quietly as the gang leader takes back the threats he made earlier. The men are preparing to leave when Yang Huai points out that there is still one matter they haven't dealt with. With a friendly smile, he explains that catching the spy may have settled the disagreement between the gang and the Bai family, but it doesn't change what happened when they first arrived. He points toward the damaged entrance and reminds them that their men smashed the Bai family's gate when they forced their way inside. Broken pieces of wood are still scattered across the ground, making it impossible for anyone to pretend there wasn't any damage. Yang Huai then asks who is going to pay for repairing it. The gang leader looks at the destroyed gate and realizes what is happening. After all the trouble he came here to cause, he is now being asked to pay for the damage by an 8-year-old child. He has little choice but to accept that he has been outplayed, so he takes out a heavy bag of coins and throws it onto the ground, saying that this is all the money he has available for the repairs. Bai Muyang watches the entire exchange in silence, clearly impressed by how cleverly his newly adopted son handled the situation. Yang Huai, meanwhile, feels satisfied with the result because he remembers how badly this same incident ended in his previous life. His years of surviving on the streets had taught him how to read people, find weaknesses, and use whatever opportunity was available. And now, those experiences have allowed him to protect his family before the disaster could even begin. The gang leader forces an awkward smile and announces that his group is leaving for real this time. The men gather themselves, turn around, and finally leave the Bai family estate without causing any more trouble. Once they are gone, Yang Huai feels relieved because he knows he has changed an event that once became the starting point for years of suffering. By exposing the spy, protecting his father, and making the gang pay for the damage they caused, he has already broken the chain of events that ruined his family in his previous life. Watching the men disappear, Yang Huai feels proud that he managed to protect his father and change their future while he still had the opportunity. He clenches his hands and reminds himself that this is only the beginning. There are still countless problems waiting ahead, but now he has the memories of his previous life and the chance to deal with each one before it destroys his family. After the gang finally leaves, Bai Muyang calls Yang Huai over and praises him for handling such a dangerous situation without anyone from the family getting hurt. Mr. Han is just as pleased and even laughs while pointing out that the boy somehow managed to make those arrogant men leave behind money for the damaged gate. Yang Huai responds with a modest smile and rubs the back of his head, keeping up the appearance of an ordinary 8-year-old while hiding the fact that his mind belongs to someone who has already already lived through an entire lifetime. From that point onward, nobody in the Bai household treats him like an outsider anymore. Even though he was only recently adopted, the way he handled the gang has earned him genuine respect from everyone in the family. The next morning, Yang Huai gets up early and ties his hair back before heading outside. The sunlight spreads across the Bai family's large estate, but he has no interest in spending his second life simply enjoying his new surroundings. He wants to make use of every advantage he has been given, starting with the body he has returned to. In the family's large training ground, he begins working through a series of martial arts exercises. Several archery targets stand at the far end of the area, while wooden training swords are arranged neatly on racks around the practice ring. Yang Huai starts with a high kick to warm up his body and gradually increases the pace of his movements. His breathing becomes heavier as he continues, and sweat soon appears across his face. He then places both hands against the ground, uses his arms to push himself forward, and performs a clean flip through the air before landing firmly on his feet. The movement feels completely different from what he was used to in his previous life. His young body responds quickly, and there is none of the stiffness or accumulated damage that had followed him for years. Yang Huai is particularly pleased by how light and flexible he feels, because his previous body had suffered serious damage to its internal energy pathways. He had spent years trying to master martial arts on his own, and the way he trained had eventually caused lasting problems that limited his progress. Now that he has returned to the beginning, he intends to avoid making the same mistake. Instead of forcing his body to advance too quickly, he plans to build his strength gradually and protect his internal pathways while reaching a level far beyond what he achieved before. While Yang Huai is training alone, Bai Muyang arrives and asks why he is awake so early. His father checks whether he slept comfortably, especially since he has only recently moved into a new home and may not have been used to the bed or the surroundings. Yang Huai smiles and tells him that he actually had the best sleep of his entire life. Bai Muyang is happy to see how quickly his adopted son has settled in, then remembers that the confusion caused by the previous day's incident prevented them from properly introducing the rest of the family. He brings 2 children over and introduces them as Yang Huai's younger siblings. One of them is 7 years old, while the other, Yang Yang, is only 5, making Yang Huai the oldest of the 3 children. The little girl is excited to meet him and happily talks about how impressive he was when he dealt with the men who broke into their home. She clearly admires her new older brother and keeps praising him for protecting everyone. Yang Huai appreciates her enthusiasm and thanks her, even telling her that she is adorable. Her brother, however, isn't nearly as welcoming. Standing with his arms crossed, he makes a sarcastic remark about Yang Huai and calls him a little pig. He then makes it clear that he considers himself the rightful heir of the Bai family and refuses to accept an adopted child as someone above him. Bai Muyang immediately tries to stop his son's disrespect, while the little girl simply looks at her brother with annoyance. Yang Huai watches the boy carefully, and because he remembers his previous life, he already understands where this attitude comes from. The child's hostility isn't really about Yang Huai personally. He is afraid that an adopted son will take away the position he believes belongs to him as the family's biological heir. Yang Huai remembers how he handled this same situation in his previous life. Out of respect for his younger brother's blood relationship with the Bai family, he always chose to step back and give in, even when the boy behaved badly. His intention had been to avoid conflict, but that only made things worse. Because nobody properly stopped him, the boy grew up believing he could do whatever he wanted inside the family. Over time, that behavior turned him into a selfish and unpleasant person who caused one problem after another for everyone around him. Remembering how much damage that attitude eventually brought to the Bai family, Yang Huai's expression becomes more serious. He has already spent one lifetime watching this happen, so he has no intention of simply repeating the same approach. When the younger boy continues insisting that he is the only legitimate eldest son of the family, Yang Huai decides that he needs to establish some boundaries from the beginning. He walks over and tells him that he needs to show proper respect when speaking to his older brother, and Bai Muyang steps in. Rather than immediately punishing his biological son with a harsh lecture, Bai Muyang explains that everything has happened too quickly for the boy to process. He believes forcing a serious lesson on him at this moment could make him even more resentful toward Yang Huai. In his view, the two children will have a better chance of becoming close if they spend time together naturally. Yang Huai understands his father's reasoning and promises that he will make an effort to build a proper relationship with his younger brother, and tells him that they will discuss the matter more carefully later. He also praises Yang Huai for showing far more maturity and manners than most children his age, while expressing some disappointment that his biological son hasn't shown the same level of behavior. Hearing his father compare the two children only makes the younger boy more upset. Yang Huai notices the change in his expression and realizes that openly comparing them is only going to make the child's resentment toward him stronger. He doesn't want to create another problem by making the boy feel as though his own father is replacing him, so he stays quiet. To ease the tension, Bai Muyang comes up with a simple solution. Starting from now on, Yang Huai and his younger brother will train together for around 2 hours every morning. He hopes that spending regular time together will help them become more comfortable with each other, and he asks both boys to get along. Yang Huai gives him an energetic nod and agrees, but as soon as Bai Muyang turns around and leaves the training ground, the atmosphere changes again. The younger boy is still clearly unhappy about having an adopted older brother. Rather than starting another argument, Yang Huai decides to approach him calmly and see if he can begin a conversation without making the situation worse. Yang Huai starts by asking his younger brother what they should do first, and even offers to demonstrate some of the exercises he has been practicing. The younger boy responds with obvious dislike and asks what the point of pretending to be friends is. He crosses his arms and makes it clear that he has no interest in getting along with an adopted child whom he still considers an outsider. He tells Yang Huai to stop acting like they are already brothers and questions why he should accept a beggar as his older brother in the first place. Yang Huai remains calm and gives him a straightforward answer. Their father has already decided that Yang Huai is the older brother, and their mother has accepted the same arrangement. The younger boy has no proper response to that logic. He turns away and continues throwing insults at Yang Huai, repeatedly using the word beggar, as though his previous life on the streets somehow makes him less deserving of respect. Yang Huai begins wondering whether the boy hates him because of his poor background, because he isn't related to the family by blood, or because of both. The younger boy answers that question himself, saying that both are reasons. He even points out that their sworn uncle comes from a respectable background and wasn't someone who had to be picked up from the streets. Yang Huai listens to this and becomes increasingly disappointed by the child's attitude. He can see that the younger boy keeps using his past as a beggar to look down on him, as though wealth and family background automatically determine a person's worth. What bothers Yang Huai even more is that he knows exactly where this attitude can lead. He remembers his father as a capable and respectable man, so he cannot understand how someone with such good qualities ended up raising a child who thinks this way. More importantly, Yang Huai remembers what happened after the younger boy eventually gained control of the family in his previous life. He refused to listen to people who were older and more experienced, cared mostly about his own desires, and repeatedly made selfish decisions without considering the consequences. Those choices eventually helped destroy the family's finances and damaged everything his father had worked to build. Yang Huai has already watched that future happen once, and the memory is still fresh enough to make him angry. He refuses to let the same chain of events begin again, especially when he has been given the chance to correct the problem while the boy is still young. Instead of continuing to argue, Yang Huai decides that the child needs to understand something through experience. He steps toward him with a much more serious expression, causing the younger boy to instinctively move backward. For the first time, the boy seems to realize that his older brother isn't going to simply tolerate every insult. Yang Huai then gives him a sharp smack as a disciplinary lesson, sending the boy down onto the dirt. The child immediately complains while holding his head, but Yang Huai feels that at least someone has finally made him stop and listen. He openly admits that he really was once a beggar who had to survive on the streets and rely on whatever food he could find. But he then asked the boy if he were abandoned outside without his family's protection, could he survive even a single day on his own? Yang Huai grabs him by the collar and asks whether he would have the same courage to insult the members of the beggar's sect to their faces if he ever met them. The younger boy is too frightened to answer. Yang Huai tells him to remember from now on that a person's background does not determine whether they deserve respect. Everyone deserves basic respect, regardless of whether they were born into a wealthy family or had to struggle just to survive. After releasing the boy, Yang Huai realizes that simply lecturing him won't be enough to change years of spoiled behavior. If he really wants the younger child to understand the difference between them, then he needs to show him through the language that martial artists understand best. He takes one of the wooden practice swords from the training rack and throws another toward the younger boy. The child catches it nervously and looks at Yang Huai, who tells him to stand up and fight. Yang Huai then offers him a deal. If the younger boy manages to defeat him, Yang Huai will accept whatever demand he makes, even if that means leaving the Bai family mansion altogether. The possibility of getting rid of the adopted brother he dislikes makes the younger boy much more interested in the match. However, Yang Huai has his own condition. If he wins, the younger boy must accept him as his older brother and follow his instructions from that point forward. Their little sister, Yang Yang, watches from the side and enthusiastically cheers for both of them. Yang Huai stamps his foot against the dirt and signals the beginning of the match. He isn't treating this as a simple training session. His goal is to show the younger boy just how large the gap between them really is and break the confidence that comes from believing that being the biological son of the family automatically makes him superior. The younger boy adjusts his grip and proudly reminds Yang Huai that he has already been training martial arts under their father for 2 years. Because of that experience, he is convinced that defeating an adopted child will be easy. Yang Huai responds by making the challenge even more humiliating. He tells the boy that he won't defend himself against the first 3 attacks. The younger brother takes the statement as an insult and warns him that he won't hold back simply because Yang Huai is older. The younger boy charges forward and attacks without hesitation, and Yang Huai avoids it so quickly that the boy loses sight of him. Before he can understand where his opponent went, he hears Yang Huai's voice from behind him. The sudden change in position leaves him confused, and he spins around while swinging his wooden sword toward empty space. Frustrated, he gathers all his strength and brings the weapon down from above, using his entire body to increase the force behind the strike. Yang Huai stops the attack with almost no effort. The younger boy can't understand how his strongest attack failed to do anything, but before he can recover, Yang Huai takes advantage of the opening and strikes him directly on the head with his practice sword. The boy falls face first into the dirt and begins crying. Yang Huai keeps his composure and tells the younger boy that their conversation about becoming proper brothers is far from over. The child rubs his aching forehead and struggles to understand how he was defeated so quickly. He accuses Yang Huai of fighting unfairly and starts making excuses for why he lost, but Yang Huai responds with a look that immediately makes him stop talking. The younger boy becomes even more intimidated and begins moving backward across the ground. Yang Huai doesn't give him much time to recover. He moves forward and unleashes a series of quick strikes. Their little sister jumps around excitedly and declares Yang Huai the winner. She runs over and happily grabs onto his leg while the younger boy remains on the ground, still trying to process how badly he was outclassed. Yang Huai dusts off his clothes and takes a breath, satisfied that he has made one thing clear on his very first day of training with his younger brother. Being the biological heir of the Bai family does not automatically make someone stronger, more capable, or more deserving of respect. After the fight, Yang Huai checks on his younger brother and notices something that actually earns his respect. Even while frightened and overwhelmed by the difference in their abilities, the boy never dropped his wooden sword. Yang Huai sees that as a sign that there is still something worth developing in him, so he decides that he is going to turn this spoiled child into someone the Bai family can be proud of. He tells the boy to stand up, and after gathering whatever pride he has left, the younger brother slowly gets back onto his feet despite the pain from the beating. Instead of continuing to punish him, Yang Huai praises him for enduring the pain without giving up. He explains that someone who comes from a martial family cannot allow physical pain to decide when they stop. The unexpected praise catches the younger boy completely off guard. Yang Huai uses the moment to ask him to acknowledge him properly as his older brother. After hesitating for a moment, the boy finally stammers out the word brother with a level of respect that wasn't there before. Yang Huai is satisfied because his little lesson seems to have worked, and he promises that once things settle down, he'll take both younger siblings outside for some fun. Yang is delighted by the idea, and with the argument between the brothers finally put aside for the moment, the three children leave the training ground together. As they walk through the estate, Yang Huai becomes excited about the idea of taking his siblings outside. He suggests that they sneak out of the Bai property and explore the world beyond the walls, promising Yang that she can see things she hasn't been able to see from inside the estate. The three eventually reach the edge of the family's enormous property and begin looking for a way through the wall. Their options are limited, and the only opening they can find is a narrow gap that looks more like something a dog would use than an entrance for people. Yang tries to squeeze through first, but the space is so tight that she struggles to get herself through. Yang Huai asks her to move over for a moment, leaving her confused about what he intends to do. The younger boy also attempts to follow, complaining about getting dust all over his clothes as he squeezes through the opening. Once he makes it to the other side, Yang Huai grabs his arm and helps him stand properly. Looking at the three of them covered in dust, Yang Huai finds the situation funny and wonders whether his siblings have really never used a small opening like this to sneak outside. Their reactions make it obvious that they have been raised very carefully and have rarely had to deal with this kind of thing. The younger boy continues complaining about ruining his clothes, but Yang Huai reminds him that this is the only practical way they can leave the estate without being noticed. Once they are outside, Yang Huai pats Yang on the head and reminds her that they haven't been able to leave the estate for months. He promises that they are going to have a great time, but Yang worries about something more practical. They don't have any money to spend. Yang Huai smiles because he has already thought about that. He pulls out a silver coin and explains that he got it from the gang members who came to their house the previous day. The little girl immediately becomes excited at the thought of being able to buy snacks. Her older brother, however, is still concerned about the plan. He points out that they are three children walking around without an adult in an area that isn't necessarily safe, and Yang is still very young. If someone tried to kidnap her, the situation could become extremely dangerous. Yang Huai is pleased to see this side of his younger brother and teases him for actually caring about his sister. The boy becomes embarrassed and turns his head away rather than admitting it directly. Yang Huai then reassures him that he knows these streets better than they do because only yesterday he was still living on them. He knows which areas are safe, which places should be avoided, and how people in this part of the city behave. He then reveals one more part of his plan. They won't actually be walking around alone because he has already arranged for someone to protect them. The children soon find out exactly who their new bodyguard is. Standing in the middle of the street is the same enormous gang leader who had broken into the Bai estate the previous day. He looks completely confused when he sees the three Bai children standing in front of him. Yang Huai, on the other hand, waves at him cheerfully and calls him Big Brother, as though they are old friends. Yang quietly asks whether that isn't the frightening man from yesterday, while the gang leader simply stares at the children, trying to understand how he ended up in this situation. He eventually asks Yang Huai what kind of joke this is supposed to be, and demands to know why he has been dragged into the middle of the city to look after children. Yang Huai reminds him that yesterday, the man himself agreed to be called Big Brother. The memory of his own promise comes rushing back, and the gang leader realizes that Yang Huai has deliberately used his own words against him. Yang Huai then makes the situation even harder for him by asking whether a man who claims to have honor can simply break a promise whenever it becomes inconvenient. He presents the gang leader with two choices, both of which leave him responsible for keeping his word. The boy then calmly asks which option he intends to choose. The gang leader grits his teeth because he understands that he has been completely cornered by an 8-year-old. He has no way to escape without admitting that he is breaking his promise, so he finally swallows his pride and agrees to act as their bodyguard. With their unexpected escort now following them, the the three siblings enter the busy market. Yang Yang is thrilled to have the freedom to choose whatever snacks she wants, and Yang Huai points her toward the food stalls while reminding her that they have enough money for her to enjoy herself. She runs toward the colorful sweets, excited by everything she sees, while her older brothers and their enormous bodyguard follow behind. The sight is strange enough on its own. An intimidating gang leader who was threatening the Bai family only a day earlier is now walking through the market as a babysitter for three children. Yang Yang keeps tugging on Yang Huai's clothes and asking for different snacks, and he happily gives her permission to choose what she likes. She runs around enjoying the freedom while the younger boy and their unwilling bodyguard watch her. Before long, the smell of roasted meat reaches them. The younger boy tries to hide his interest, but Yang Huai notices him repeatedly looking toward the skewer stall. He buys one and hands the hot skewer to his younger brother, calling him by an affectionate nickname. The boy is surprised that Yang Huai noticed what he wanted and asks how he knew he preferred meat over sweets. Yang Huai laughs and explains that it wasn't difficult to figure out because the boy had been secretly watching the food stall the entire time. The younger brother finally gives in and takes a large bite. The taste immediately wins him over, and even though he tries not to show too much excitement, he admits that the food is excellent. Yang Huai jokes that of course it tastes especially good because he was the one who bought it. The younger boy quickly changes the subject and turns his attention toward Yang Yang, warning her not to eat too many sweets at once because too much sugar isn't good for her. Yang Yang argues back, and the two children begin bickering over it like normal siblings. Yang Huai watches them with a smile, enjoying something he never had the chance to experience properly in his previous life. Instead of seeing his younger siblings as people who will eventually become part of the family's problems, he is now able to watch them simply behave like children. The day continues with the three siblings enjoying their time outside before they eventually return to the Bai estate. Their little adventure doesn't go unnoticed, however. According to Yang Yang's later diary entries, Bai Muyang was furious when he discovered what they had done. After spending the entire day outside without permission, the three children end up kneeling together in the dirty courtyard while their father gives them a serious lecture. Yang Huai realizes that his younger siblings are also going to receive punishment, so rather than allowing them to take the same blame, he steps forward and accepts responsibility himself. He asks his father to punish him instead, taking the pressure off the younger two, because he believes that as their older brother, protecting them is part of his responsibility. According to Yang Yang's diary, she was secretly relieved when Yang Huai took responsibility for the trouble they had caused. She admits that she really didn't want to face their father's anger and was happy to avoid the punishment. Even though the day ended with a serious lecture, she still remembers their trip to the market as one of the best days the three siblings had spent together. As evening approaches, the sunlight begins to fade and the buildings around the town are covered in a warm glow. The busy streets slowly become quieter as people start heading home, but the gang leader from the previous day is still outside, sitting alone at a small, rundown food stall and enjoying a quiet meal. His peace doesn't last long. Yang Huai suddenly appears beside him with a huge smile and greets him as Big Brother. The gang leader nearly chokes on his noodles and turns toward the child with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. He demands to know why Yang Huai has come to bother him again when he was finally enjoying some peace. Yang Huai doesn't take his anger seriously and casually explains that he simply wanted to stop by and say hello. The gang leader rubs his head and wonders whether being forced to babysit these children earlier wasn't already enough trouble for one day. Yang Huai then changes his attitude and tells him that this visit is different because he has something important to discuss. The gang leader notices the change and becomes more attentive, wondering what kind of business an 8-year-old could possibly bring to him. Yang Huai tells him that he knows where a rival gang has hidden a large amount of silver. The gang leader is so surprised that he almost drops his meal, then asks where a child could possibly get information like that. Yang Huai maintains the same story he has used before, claiming that he heard about it while living on the streets and picking up information from people around the city. The gang leader doesn't completely trust him and starts looking for weaknesses in the story. Yang Huai doesn't give him him much time to question it. He confidently proposes that the two of them work together and take advantage of the information. The idea catches the man's interest, but he wants to know why Yang Huai would reveal such valuable information instead of taking the silver for himself. Yang Huai responds by praising the gang leader's reputation and calling him an honorable man who is well known throughout the area. The compliment catches the large man off guard because he isn't used to hearing anyone describe him that way. His mood improves for a moment, but Yang Huai quickly admits that he was only joking, bringing the conversation back to the real reason he came. Yang Huai reveals that he has heard some very specific information about the faction's leader and a woman the man secretly cares about. He tells the gang leader that the faction's leader has a hidden mistress, and the revelation immediately changes the atmosphere. The gang leader is furious that a child somehow knows about such private matters. He rises from his seat and makes it clear that he has no patience for someone exposing his personal affairs. Yang Huai doesn't back away. Instead, he points out that he isn't the type of person who will simply sit quietly while someone threatens him. The gang leader's anger grows, but Yang Huai calmly asks him to hear the rest of the proposal, because the information could solve a much bigger problem for him. Yang Huai explains that he knows how important the woman is to the gang leader and promises that he can help make her his official wife. The statement catches the man's attention because this isn't just a random relationship. Yang Huai knows from his previous life that this woman was the person the gang leader loved most, and her fate eventually became the reason the entire faction descended into conflict. In Yang Huai's previous life, the faction's leader refused to accept the woman because of her background and wanted his son to marry someone from a powerful family instead. He believed that choosing a high-status woman would strengthen the organization, so he treated the gang leader's relationship as an obstacle rather than something worth protecting. Eventually, the woman was killed because of that decision. The faction's leader failed to understand how deeply the gang leader cared about her. Once he lost the person who mattered most to him, his relationship with his own father collapsed completely. That conflict spread through the organization and eventually became a major internal war. The faction that had once controlled a large part of the region was torn apart from within, and countless people suffered because its leadership could no longer work together. Yang Huai remembers all of this, which is why he understands the man's feelings better than almost anyone else. He also knows that his current body limits what he can accomplish on his own. He may have the memories and knowledge of his previous life, but he is still an 8-year-old child. Until he grows stronger, he needs someone powerful enough to protect him and help him deal with problems that he cannot handle alone. Yang Huai sees the gang leader as the perfect person for that role. If he can help the man protect the woman he loves and change the tragedy that destroyed his family in the previous timeline, he can earn his loyalty before anyone else has the chance to do so. The gang leader is curious despite himself and asks how a child intends to accomplish something that even he has been unable to achieve. Yang Huai explains that if the gang leader eventually rises to the highest position within the organization, nobody will have the authority to question the woman's background or prevent him from making her his wife. In other words, the key is power. But Yang Huai doesn't stop there. He reveals that another rival group is preparing something far more dangerous than simply hiding stolen silver. According to the information he has gathered, the rival group is secretly transporting powerful explosives and intends to use them against the gang leader's organization. If nothing is done, the attack could cause enormous losses and completely change the balance of power in the area. The gang leader listens carefully as Yang Huai explains the situation. The boy points out that this is the perfect opportunity for him to prove himself. If he discovers the planned attack and protects his people before the rival group can carry it out, he can gain enormous influence within the organization. At the same time, stopping the attack would protect the people under his command and give him a legitimate reason to rise through the ranks. Yang Huai then asks him directly whether he is willing to cooperate. The gang leader remains silent for a moment. He also knows that people who survive on the streets often hear things that ordinary people never notice. So the boy's claim about the rival group's secret operation suddenly seems much more believable. After weighing everything, the gang leader decides that the chances of Yang Huai being right are high enough to take the risk. His desire to gain more power also pushes him forward, so he tells Yang Huai to lead the way. He makes it clear that he is only willing to trust the child this once, but Yang Huai is already pleased that his plan worked. He turns around and confidently praises his new ally, knowing that having such a powerful person on his side will make things much easier while he is still young. Night settles over the town as the two make their way toward the rival group's hiding place. The busy parts of the city have become quiet, and the moon provides the only real light over the streets. Eventually, they reach an older section of town where several worn-down buildings stand away from the main roads. A few men are scattered around the area, dressed like ordinary homeless people. Their clothes are deliberately rough and dirty, but their behavior gives them away. They stay alert, keep watch over the surroundings, and regularly check whether anyone is approaching. These men aren't beggars at all. They are guards protecting the rival group's secret base. From a distance, the gang leader studies the area and notices how poorly their disguise has been put together. He offers to deal with one of the guards himself and asks Yang Huai whether he can handle the other two. Before moving forward, he even questions whether the child has enough martial ability to fight them if things go wrong. Yang Huai doesn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he bends down and picks up a few stones from the ground. The gang leader looks at him with some doubt, but Yang Huai explains that situations like this aren't always solved by having greater strength. When you are smaller and weaker than your opponent, thinking carefully can be more useful than trying to overpower them. Meanwhile, one of the disguised guards is leaning against a wall, clearly bored with standing watch. The quiet night is broken when Yang Huai suddenly calls out and walks directly toward the group. The three guards immediately notice him and become suspicious about why a child would be wandering around such an isolated place at night. They question him about what he is doing there, and one of the larger men pushes him aside while warning him that this isn't a place for beggars looking for food. Yang Huai pretends to be offended and asks why they are treating another person from the streets so badly. He then brings up a strange rumor about beggars who refuse to look for food even when they are offered it. To test their reaction, Yang Huai produces a bowl of soup and offers it to them. The disguised guards stare at the simple food with clear disgust. One of them loses patience and knocks the bowl away instead of accepting it. Yang Huai uses that reaction to strengthen his suspicion. He points out that someone pretending to be a beggar should not be so unwilling to accept free food. His expression changes, and he directly asks whether these men are actually who they claim to be. The guards realize that their cover may have been exposed and quietly discuss what to do with the child. One suggests killing him before he can report anything, but their leader rejects the idea because causing trouble here could expose their hidden base. Instead, he orders them to frighten Yang Huai away. Yang Huai listens carefully while watching their movements, using his experience from his previous life to judge their abilities. He realizes that the three men are capable martial artists, roughly at the middle level, while his current body still doesn't possess enough internal energy to defeat them through a direct fight. Even knowing that, Yang Huai doesn't retreat. He deliberately steps onto one of the stones he had picked up earlier and pretends to lose his balance. One of the guards turns back toward him and threatens to beat him if he doesn't leave. Yang Huai continues acting frightened and stumbles forward. He throws the bowl containing the remaining soup directly toward the guard's face. The hot liquid catches the man off guard, and he cries out in anger while Yang Huai immediately apologizes as though it were an accident. The moment the guard's attention is disrupted, Yang Huai changes his posture and moves. He knows he cannot rely on raw strength, so he uses the martial techniques he remembers from his previous life to compensate for the weakness of his current body. With a quick movement, he closes the distance between them. The guard barely has time to understand what is happening before Yang Huai reaches him. The boy keeps the bowl between them and drives the stone in his hand forward with precise timing. The strike lands with enough force to break through the bowl and hit the guard, sending him stumbling backward and knocking him unconscious. The other two men stare at their fallen companion, unable to understand how a child managed to defeat a trained fighter so quickly. Yang Huai looks at them calmly and reminds them of an old martial arts saying, "Never judge a person's danger by their appearance. Women, elderly people, and children can still be dangerous, and underestimating someone simply because they look weak can lead to defeat." One of the remaining guards becomes furious and draws his weapon, preparing to attack Yang Huai. Before he can reach the child, the gang leader appears behind him. His enormous hands seize the two guards from behind and lift them off the ground with ease. The men struggle, but they have no chance against his strength. The gang leader then knocks the two together and leaves them unconscious on the ground. Yang Huai watches the entire thing and makes a light comment about how quickly his new partner dealt with them. He then praises the gang leader for handling the situation without wasting time. Afterward, the gang leader looks at the defeated guards and admits that despite losing quickly, they were still competent mid-level martial artists. That makes Yang Huai's performance even harder for him to understand. He looks at the child, wondering how someone so young could move quickly enough to defeat an experienced fighter. Since he has already seen Yang Huai produce information that no ordinary child should know, he begins wondering whether the boy has some kind of unusual technique or hidden advantage that allows him to fight far beyond what his young body should be capable of. With the three guards out of the way, Yang Huai and the gang leader now have a clear path into the hidden base. One of the guards is still unconscious on the ground after Yang Huai's earlier attack, while the other two are no longer in a position to stop them. The gang leader moves to the warehouse and forces open the wooden door. Inside, the two find rows upon rows of wooden crates filling the dark building. There is far more stored here than either of them expected. The gang leader suggests that they should search quickly and leave before anyone else arrives, but Yang Huai isn't worried. He already knows what they came for and starts looking around with confidence. He also takes the opportunity to praise his new partner for dealing with the guards so easily. The giant laughs proudly and starts talking about his own strength, which makes Yang Huai realize that his new ally has an enormous ego. Yang Huai ignores the boasting and opens one of the large chests. The moment the lid rises, bright silver catches the light and fills the room with a reflection. The chest is packed with silver coins, far more than the gang leader expected to find. He stares at the fortune for a moment, clearly pleased with what they have discovered. Then he suggests that Yang Huai take the explosives while he keeps the silver. Yang Huai immediately reminds him that their agreement was to divide the spoils equally. He then makes his own proposal. The gang leader can take the explosives while Yang Huai takes the money. The man's expression becomes serious as he realizes the child isn't going to let him change the deal. He calls Yang Huai a troublesome brat and wonders whether the boy planned to take advantage of him from the beginning. Yang Huai doesn't answer directly. Instead, he thinks about what he has learned about the man and decides that this is the perfect opportunity to test his character. Yang Huai opens his arms and tells the gang leader that if he really wants the silver that badly, he can simply kill him and take it. The suggestion catches the man completely off guard. Yang Huai calmly explains that killing an 8-year-old would be easy for someone as strong as him, and because Yang Huai was only recently adopted, the Bai family could simply assume that he had run away. There would be no shortage of ways for the gang leader to make the boy disappear without leaving evidence. The warehouse falls silent while the man considers what the child is saying. Yang Huai isn't frightened at all. Instead, he continues explaining that if the man wants to remove him, this is probably the easiest opportunity he'll ever get. The gang leader can only stare at him, wondering how a child can speak so casually about his own life. The man's discomfort grows as he studies Yang Huai's expression. The boy has repeatedly placed himself in dangerous situations without showing much fear, and it reminds the gang leader of someone who is constantly walking along the edge of a cliff without worrying about what happens if he falls. For a brief moment, the man imagines a completely different figure standing behind Yang Huai, almost like the shadow of an experienced wandering warrior. The presence seems far too powerful for the small child standing in front of him. He shakes his head and tries to clear the strange impression from his mind, realizing that Yang Huai's attitude has genuinely unsettled him. After thinking it over, he lets out a long sigh and gives up on the argument. He tells Yang Huai to take all the silver. The gang leader explains that he has no interest in killing someone who cannot properly defend himself, and taking the life of the child who has been calling him Big Brother would probably haunt him afterward. He is satisfied with taking the explosive explosives, because successfully completing that part of the mission should already be enough to improve his position within the organization. Yang Huai is quietly pleased with the answer. He had suspected that the gang leader wasn't truly cruel despite his intimidating appearance, and this confirms it. Beneath all the rough behavior, the man still has a line he refuses to cross. Yang Huai gives him a genuine smile, happy that he has found someone he can potentially trust. With the mission finished, the gang leader turns around and prepares to leave the warehouse. Yang Huai suddenly runs after him and wraps his arms around the man's waist in a playful hug, joking that he will probably appear in the man's dreams from now on. The gang leader immediately complains that the boy is strange and asks what he is doing, but Yang Huai only laughs and asks whether he enjoyed the hug. Despite the man's irritation, their relationship has clearly changed from what it was when they first met. The next morning, everything looks peaceful at the entrance of the Bai mansion. Inside, however, the atmosphere is completely different. Bai Muyang and Mr. Han are staring at a large chest filled with silver coins sitting in the middle of the room. The amount of money is so large that the butler is genuinely worried and asks Yang Huai where he could possibly have gotten it. Yang Huai proudly claims that he worked hard for every coin, but Mr. Han isn't convinced for even a second. He wants to know how an 8-year-old child could possibly earn such a fortune overnight. Yang Huai then starts talking about what the money could be used for. He suggests repairing the damaged parts of the estate, paying off their debts, and buying medicine for his mother. Hearing him speak so sincerely about using the money to help the family, Mr. Han becomes emotional. To him, Yang Huai isn't thinking about buying expensive toys or keeping the fortune for himself. His first thought is how to improve the lives of the people who accepted him into their home. Bai Muyang, however, remains serious. He looks at the enormous amount of silver and asks Yang Huai to tell him the truth. He worries that his adopted son may have gotten involved in something dangerous or committed some serious mistake without understanding the consequences. Yang Huai assures him that nothing bad happened and then casually reveals that he spent the previous night with the same gang leader who had smashed their front gate the day before. He even laughs lightly while saying it, which does little to calm his father's concerns. Yang Huai then explains the entire story, from meeting the gang leader to discovering the rival group's warehouse, defeating the guards, finding the explosives, and returning with the silver. The explanation takes hours, and by the time he finishes, the tea and snacks that were brought into the room have been sitting there long enough for the whole morning to pass. When the story is over, Yang Huai explains that he sees what happened as turning something bad into something useful. He wanted to use the money to repay the Bai family for accepting him and giving him a home. He speaks sincerely about how much their kindness means to him, and both Bai Muyang and Mr. Han become quiet. His father looks down at the silver and thinks carefully about what he has just heard. He knows that Yang Huai technically deserves punishment for leaving the estate, involving himself with dangerous people, and taking part in such a risky operation. At the same time, he can't deny that the boy handled the entire situation with an ability far beyond his age. Bai Muyang realizes that constantly restricting Yang Huai simply because he is young could prevent him from developing his natural talent. He regrets that the Bai family doesn't currently have enough resources or the right teachers to properly nurture someone with Yang Huai's potential, but he refuses to become the person who holds the boy back. Instead, Bai Muyang asks Yang Huai to make one promise. No matter how talented he becomes, he must avoid unnecessary and reckless danger whenever possible. Yang Huai is deeply touched by the request because he remembers that in both of his lives, this man has always treated him like a real son. His father trusts him even after hearing everything he has done, and that means more to him than the silver itself. Bai Muyang then makes one final decision. The Bai family will not simply take the entire fortune Yang Huai brought back. He pushes half of the silver toward the boy and tells him to keep it for himself and learn how to manage his own money. Mr. Han is stunned by the decision, but Bai Muyang remains firm. He wants Yang Huai to understand that the family trusts him enough to give him responsibility over what he has earned. After accepting the task, the young boy begins thinking about the enormous responsibility that has been placed on his shoulders. At only 8 years old, he has been entrusted with half of the clan's starting capital, giving him a resource that could shape the family's future. Hoi sits down and begins considering how he should use the money. Rather than spending it carelessly, his thoughts are already focused on the future. He starts drafting several investment plans, hoping to multiply the capital and create a stable source of income for the clan. While Hoi is deeply focused on his writing, little Yan Yan quietly peeks through the crack in the door. Curious about what her older brother is doing, she watches him carefully as he works with a calligraphy brush. Eventually, Yan Yan steps inside and asks what he is writing so seriously. Hoi hands her the page, but she innocently reminds him that she still doesn't know how to read. Realizing his mistake, Hoi explains that he is writing a novel. To make the meaning easier for her to understand, he simply tells her that it's basically a very fun story. Yan Yan's face brightens when she connects the word with the storybooks their mother often reads. Hoi then tells her that he was actually preparing to visit their mother. He places the brush back onto the inkstone after finishing his work. Looking fondly at the manuscript, Hoi decides to take it with him and ask his mother whether she finds the story interesting. On the study table, the completed manuscript with its green cover rests beside the other writing materials. The scene then shifts to a beautiful panoramic view of the outer grounds of the Grand Manor under pleasant daytime weather. Inside the residence, however, the atmosphere is much quieter. The sound of persistent coughing can be heard coming from one of the rooms. A woman weakly presses a handkerchief against her lips as another coughing fit leaves her exhausted. This is Jung In-hwa, Hoi's mother, whose delicate health has left her looking pale and frail as she rests on the bed. Hoi approaches the room and timidly announces his arrival. Mother, In-hwa turns toward her son, surprised by the unexpected visit. Before greeting him warmly, Hoi walks toward the bed with the manuscript held carefully in both hands. When his mother asks why he came, he affectionately tells her that he simply wanted to talk with her and spend some time together. As Hoi looks at his mother's pale complexion, concern quietly settles in his thoughts. The strong smell of medicine filling the room reminds him of his previous life. His mother had always possessed an extremely fragile constitution, and eventually, her illness had taken her life far too early. In his previous life, Hoi's father had done everything he could to find a cure for In-hwa, but the cost of constant medical treatment became an unbearable burden for the family. The clan's debts continued piling up until the once stable Bayak Manor began falling into financial ruin. And after In-hwa passed away, the patriarch was consumed by grief and eventually became seriously ill himself. Witnessing his family fall apart, one tragedy at a time, had also caused Hoi to lose his way in his previous life. Now, however, he has another chance. Hoi reaches a clear conclusion. If he wants to save his family, the first thing he needs to do is save his mother. To accomplish that, he needs money. A lot of it. Although the silver recovered from the criminals has given him a considerable amount of capital, Hoi knows that it won't be enough. He needs to establish a proper business capable of generating a steady income for the family. Only then will he have enough resources to hire the best physicians and obtain the medicine his mother needs. After gathering his thoughts, Hoi brings up something he learned from his little sister. He mentions that Yan Yan told him about his mother's love for reading novels, drawing In-hwa's attention to the papers he has been carrying. His mother gives a gentle smile and explains that she only reads to pass the time while resting in bed. That's exactly what Hoi was hoping to hear. He asks his mother to read and judge something he has written himself. Hoi carefully presents the manuscript titled The Bond of Absolute Love. He explains that he created the story by combining fragments of various tales he had heard around the city. In-hwa is surprised by the revelation. She looks at her young son and asks whether he really wrote an entire novel by himself. Hoi simply gives her a confident smile and waits patiently as his mother opens the manuscript. In-hwa begins reading the handwritten pages attentively, carefully turning through the manuscript Hoi has prepared. As she progresses through the story, her expression gradually changes. The more she reads, the more captivated she becomes. Hoi watches his mother's reaction from the side. When she reaches the opening lines, Manhwa is left struggling to find the words to describe what she has just read. Hoi gently encourages her to continue and asks whether she finds the story entertaining. Eventually, Manhwa reaches the final page and closes the manuscript on her lap. A radiant smile appears on her face, her eyes filled with genuine happiness. Hoi asks what she thinks of his story. His mother warmly praises his work, telling him that it was incredibly fun and engaging. She admits that she became so absorbed in the story that she completely lost track of time. Then, filled with curiosity, Manhwa asks where her young son learned such an original plot. Hoi simply laughs and tells her that he only pieced together fragments of stories he had heard on the streets. For Hoi, writing the novel is hardly a challenge. In his previous life, during the years when he wandered from place to place, popular novels were one of the few sources of entertainment he had outside his brutal training. Adventure, action, and tales of justice had been his favorites, and he had read some of them dozens of times. Because of that, the stories remained engraved in his memory, down to every line, allowing him to reproduce them without much difficulty. Even so, Hoi silently apologizes to the authors who would create these works in the future before turning his attention back to the matter at hand. He asks his mother whether she thinks the novel could actually be sold, and Manhwa is caught off guard by the fact that her 8-year-old son is already thinking about turning his writing into a business. Rather than dismissing the idea, she recognizes the clever opportunity behind it and marvels at how quickly Hoi has begun thinking about ways to earn money. Hoi keeps his confidence to himself, knowing that this manuscript could become the first step toward the business he intends to build. Not long afterward, a messenger leaves the gates of Bayak Manor on horseback, carrying a letter meant for a traditional bookstore in Namchang. A young woman, wearing a broad straw hat and veil, arrives at the manor. She adjusts the covering as she stands before the enormous gate, then reveals her face, glasses visible beneath the brim. With a friendly expression, she asks whether this is really the residence of the Bayak family. The grand entrance stands before her, while a gentle breeze passes through the sunny courtyard. But the woman seems more concerned with gathering enough courage to make herself heard. She takes a deep breath, puffs out her cheeks, and calls through the gate, asking for the writer known as the Swift Writer. She explains that she came all the way there as soon as the Namchang bookstore forwarded her letter. The manor's staff can only stare at the unusual visitor and her persistent demands until the house administrator approaches to find out what is going on. When the administrator asks who she is and whom she wants to meet, the young woman explains that she received a letter bearing the Swift Writer's signature. The mention of that name leaves Bayak Murray completely puzzled. Meanwhile, from above the manor wall, Hoi and his younger brother Hanso have been watching the commotion below. Neither of them can understand who the woman is talking about. Hanso, however, begins to look uneasy when Hoi turns his attention toward him, especially as the visitor suddenly spots him and happily announces that he has finally appeared. Hoi folds his arms and asks whether his adopted older brother has gotten himself into trouble yet again. Hanso takes offense at the accusation and fires back that there hasn't been a single quiet day in the manor since Hoi arrived. He then starts listing the incidents that have made his brother suspicious in the first place. On his very first day, Hoi somehow managed to confront Guak, the feared warrior of the martial underworld, known as Bloodblade, and even came away with money from the encounter. Then there was Hoi's mysterious martial ability, which was far beyond what anyone would expect from a child, with no clear explanation for where he had learned such techniques. On top of that, an enormous amount of silver had recently been confiscated from the Green Snake Gang. Hoi tries to justify that last incident by explaining that he only took dirty money away from criminals so it could be put toward the family's needs. But Hanso isn't finished. He points out that Hoi has now written a novel good enough to captivate both their mother and little sister. Putting all those strange events together, he asks whether Hoi might actually be some ancient monster who has somehow returned to life in the body of a child. The accusation lands far closer to the truth than Hanso realizes, leaving Hoi sweating beneath his innocent appearance. He forces out an awkward laugh and brushes the theory aside, but internally, he has to admit that his younger brother's conclusion isn't completely unreasonable. Considering everything Hoi knows from his former life, Hanso has connected the clues remarkably well. The conversation then takes a more sincere turn. Hanso drops his earlier hostility and admits that he didn't welcome the idea of suddenly having an adopted older brother. Since their father already had him as his biological son, he couldn't understand why another child needed to be brought into the family. Deep down, he worried that Hoi would receive the attention, affection, and expectations that he believed belonged to him. For a while, that fear made Hanso feel as though he had become an outsider in his own home. The two brothers stand together in silence as Hanso finally voices those feelings honestly, giving Hoi a glimpse into what had been going through the younger boy's mind. Yet Hanso also admits that his opinion changed after seeing Hoi's actions firsthand. He eventually understood that his adopted brother wasn't trying to take anything away from the family and was genuinely working for the clan's future. One of the clearest examples was the demanding training Hoi had introduced. Every day, the family members and disciples practiced with wooden swords in the inner courtyard under his direction. Even little Yan Yan had been dragged into the routine, and one day she finally appeared exhausted beyond her limit, complaining through tears that she couldn't continue anymore. Hoi allowed his youngest sister to stop for the day and go inside to rest, recognizing that she had already pushed herself hard enough. The other workers and disciples eventually finished their own training as well, with everyone talking about taking a bath and finally getting some sleep. For most of them, the day's work was over, but later that night, as Hanso was returning to his quarters, an unusual rhythmic sound coming from the outer courtyard catches his attention. He follows the noise and looks outside, only to find Hoi still practicing alone beneath the moonlight. While everyone else has already gone to bed, the young master continues swinging his wooden sword through the empty air, repeating each movement with careful precision. His body is clearly reaching its limits, yet he keeps working on his technique, even adding sandbags to himself to make every movement more demanding. Hanso watches from a distance, realizing that the brother he once viewed as a threat to his place in the family is putting himself through this exhausting routine when nobody is there to praise or acknowledge him. In the end, Hanso chooses not to interrupt. He returns to his room, assuming Hoi will eventually finish and come inside to rest. The long night passes quietly, and before long, darkness gives way to a beautiful golden dawn spreading across the mountains surrounding the Bayak family's estate. The following morning, Hanso wakes up feeling refreshed and stretches before preparing to begin his usual routine. But the moment he slides open the wooden door of his quarters, something in the inner courtyard catches his attention. Training is already underway despite the early hour. Under the soft orange glow of dawn, Hanso spots a familiar figure moving across the courtyard with a sword in hand. As he gets a better look, he realizes that it is Hoi, and the sight raises an obvious question. Did his older brother really continue training throughout the entire night? Hoi has even added more sandbags to his body, yet instead of the wooden sword he used before, he is now practicing with a genuine metal blade. Every movement is controlled and deliberate as he works through complicated combinations, his attention fixed entirely on improving his swordsmanship. A powerful diagonal slash cuts through the morning air, followed by a series of precise movements that reveal just how far his skills have progressed. As the blade moves, a bright blue trail briefly streaks through the dim courtyard. Hanso watches as Hoi completes an intricate sequence, the force of his movements sending dust and wind outward. Then he recognizes the technique. These are the movements of the three heavens opening sword. More astonishingly, Hoi's execution matches their father's technique almost perfectly. Hanso can barely believe what he is witnessing. His adopted older brother has already reached complete mastery of the Bayak family's most important and complicated martial art. After finishing the demanding session, Hoi stands covered in sweat and breathing heavily. That's when he notices Hanso nearby and turns toward him without any fuss. He removes the heavy sandbags strapped around his body, allowing them to fall onto the ground, and casually asks what brought his younger brother outside so early. Instead of keeping the moment to himself, Hoi praises Hanso for getting up early to train and offers to practice together. Hanso hesitates as he considers the invitation. This is no longer the brother he once viewed with resentment. Hoi is openly offering to guide him and help him improve. Hanso eventually reaches out and accepts his older brother's hand, a simple gesture that marks how much his feelings have changed. Hoi promises to teach him the family technique step by step until Hanso can master it himself. But the moment Hoi hands him the training sandbags, Hanso is caught off guard by how heavy they are. Even so, as he struggles with them, he realizes that this is what having a genuine older brother should feel like. Someone who supports you, teaches you, and helps you become stronger. That realization leaves Hanso with a strange sense of pride. Lately, he has found himself wanting to tell everyone he knows about his new family situation. Though embarrassed by the thought, he privately admits that he feels fortunate to have an older brother who is dependable and protective. Hoi notices the change as well and looks at Hanso with quiet affection. What makes him especially happy is hearing Hanso call him brother naturally. In his previous life, that same boy had stubbornly refused to acknowledge him as a legitimate member of the family, often shouting that he would never accept Hoi. Remembering those painful moments leaves a bitter taste, but Hoi chooses not to dwell on them. Instead, he reaches over and affectionately ruffles Hanso's hair, earning an awkward complaint from the younger boy. Hoi then reassures him that he'll continue working to secure more money for the family, and whenever he goes out, he'll make sure to bring back plenty of delicious snacks for his younger brother. He even suggests that they should go on another enjoyable outing together soon. Hanso becomes visibly embarrassed by the sudden affection, looking at Hoi with a mixture of curiosity and confusion as he tries to understand this overly caring side of his older brother. Still, the two continue talking comfortably in the courtyard, their relationship now carrying a warmth that had never existed between them before. Their peaceful morning is interrupted by a familiar voice from outside the residence. The woman with the round glasses is once again calling out for the swift rider. The story then moves into the elegant reception hall of Bayak Manor, where the visitor finally introduces herself properly as Chu Yong-wol. She explains that she came directly after receiving the letter forwarded by the Namchang bookstore and apologizes for arriving without prior notice. Hoi politely assures her that there is no inconvenience and welcomes her as a guest. Yong-wol studies the young master carefully through her round glasses before admitting that she never expected the person behind the Swift Rider pen name to be an 8-year-old boy. Based on the sophistication of the writing and the quality of the calligraphy, she had imagined the author to be a much older, middle-aged master. Hoi modestly responds that his calligraphy still has plenty of room for improvement, while privately finding her estimation amusing. After all, when his current 8 years are combined with the 30 years he lived in his previous life, her guess isn't particularly far from his true mental age. Yong-wol makes it clear that she isn't interested in judging a business partner based on age or gender. What matters to her is the value of the work and the purpose behind the transaction. She therefore gets straight to the question of why Hoi sent her the manuscript in the first place. Looking at the copy resting on the table, she points out that she highly doubts an 8-year-old would go through the trouble of sending a novel to her simply for casual reading. Hoi appreciates her direct approach and realizes that there is no reason to waste time with unnecessary explanations. With a confident smile, he gets to the heart of the matter. He wants to use Chu Yong-wol's established bookstore network to publish and distribute his future literary works. The moment he states his objective, Yong-wol's suspicions are confirmed. She now understands that the young master isn't merely an unusually talented child who enjoys writing. He has come to her with a genuine commercial proposal. Yong-wol's interest in the manuscript is genuine, but she points out a major obstacle standing between Hoi's stories and commercial success. In this region, popular tales are traditionally spread through storytellers performing in tea houses, meaning people can enjoy an entire story without spending money on a physical book. Since buying bound volumes isn't yet a common habit, she isn't convinced that even an excellent novel can guarantee enough sales to make the venture profitable. Hoi, however, has no such doubts. He confidently assures her that this particular story will sell exceptionally well because he already knows how the market will develop from what he witnessed in his former life. Once the work is properly printed and readers begin recommending it to one another, curiosity will drive people toward the bookstores, eventually turning the novel into something readers actively compete to obtain. Yang Wool studies the young author's confidence and asks whether he can really continue producing stories good enough to create that kind of demand. Hoi answers by pointing back to the manuscript in front of them. After all, she herself was captivated by the first volume. Then he reveals the real scale of his advantage. The story she's holding is only one among more than 100 equally engaging works already preserved in his memory. Yang Wool can hardly process the claim. She repeats the number, trying to comprehend the possibility that an 8-year-old has access to more than 100 stories of comparable quality. While Hoi calmly enjoys his tea, the merchant's imagination races ahead. She can already picture the customers, the profits, and the enormous possibilities such a collection could bring to her bookstore network. Unable to contain her excitement any longer, Yang Wool reaches across the table and grabs Hoi's small hands, asking him to enter an exclusive publishing partnership with Bixo Bookstore. She enthusiastically promises that doing business with her will never leave him disappointed. Her confidence comes from years of merchant experience, and she explains that her instincts told her from the very first reading that his manuscript could become a fortune for the clan. Hoi, meanwhile, starts sweating under the intensity of her enthusiasm. He agrees to the partnership, but politely asks her to release his hands. Yang Wool laughs and apologizes for getting carried away, while Hoi takes a moment to assess the personality of the woman who is about to become his business partner. The story then presents the impressive headquarters of the Byakuseo Commercial Association, a merchant organization whose future Hoi already knows far better than anyone around him. At this point in time, it is still only a modest antique bookstore, but Hoi remembers that within less than a decade, it will expand into a nationwide commercial association, and the person responsible for much of that remarkable growth will be none other than Chu Yang Wool herself. Her reputation for exceptional merchant instincts wasn't exaggerated after all, and Hoi considers himself fortunate to have secured a connection with someone destined to become such an influential guild leader. Yang Wool explains that there was another reason she personally traveled to Byac Manor. She wanted to meet the author behind the remarkable manuscript face to face. Hoi asks whether he lived up to the expectations she had before meeting him, and her answer is an enthusiastic yes. She believes his talent could do more than simply produce successful stories. It could challenge the old tea house storytelling culture and completely change how literature is consumed in the future. With both sides satisfied, Yang Wool presents the formal terms of their exclusive publishing arrangement, offering Hoi a 40% share of the profits. Hoi accepts, but he also has a marketing idea of his own. For every new release, he plans to personally sign only 10 copies and reserve them for the earliest buyers. These limited editions would become special collector's items, potentially increasing in value as the swift writer's reputation spreads across the country. Yang Wool loves the proposal and takes it even further. She suggests decorating those 10 exclusive copies with gold thread so they can be sold at an even higher price. Hoi is intrigued by the idea, but quietly worries about how much such decoration will add to the production costs. Before the discussion can go any further, he places a heavy wooden box onto the reception table. Yang Wool watches as he opens it, revealing a large quantity of pure silver inside. Hoi then makes another proposal. He is willing to invest around 4,000 taels of silver into her bookstore, so production can begin on a much larger scale. For a moment, Yang Wool is unable to respond. The amount of capital being offered by an 8-year-old completely overwhelms her expectations. Then her excitement returns at full force. She throws her arms around Hoi, promising to take exceptional care of her new investor and business business partner. She even tries to celebrate with a kiss on his cheek, while Hoi awkwardly struggles against the hug and protests. By the time the scene settles down, Hoi is standing with a serious expression, while lipstick marks cover his forehead and cheeks, with manager Han watching the spectacle from the background. Yongwol eventually climbs onto her horse and prepares to leave, calling out that she will return with good news for her investor. Hoi, still embarrassed from the farewell, simply tells her to hurry up and leave. Hoi smiles to himself, already planning to write several more works and send them to his new partner. Yongwol returns his confidence with a cheerful gesture before continuing down the road, promising that she'll handle everything and eagerly await the next stories he sends. The residents of Bayak Manor watch her departure beneath the bright morning sky. Hoi looks toward the horizon, reflecting on the woman he has just partnered with. Her ability to recognize opportunities and act decisively has surpassed even his expectations.